Great. Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's session. My name is Madeline Babb, and I am the Executive Vice President of PreMedCC, a student-run organization created in the fall of 2021. Our goal as an organization was to create an online program for pre-medical students at community colleges and universities with the hope of guiding the next generation of diverse and inclusive physicians. We know how challenging it is to find guidance and mentorship, especially in the middle of a pandemic. While we advertise our organization as being for community college students, our events are open to anyone. We realize that finding guidance and mentorship in a pre-med journey can be especially challenging for first-generation pre-med students, people that lack the financial resources, or just those that don't know anyone in the medical field. One of the best parts about our events is that they are virtual, so you can do it from the comfort of your own home. We typically have events on Fridays from 5 p.m. to 6:30 p.m. and Saturdays from 11 a.m. to 12:30 p.m. Pacific time. If you aren't able to attend the event, all of our sessions are uploaded to our YouTube channel. Many of our sessions will end with a Q&A with our speakers. Any questions that you have can be put in the Q&A section on Zoom, and our team members will read them. After you have attended our event, you can log into our website and complete the quiz, which will contain questions pertaining to today's session. If you score 70% or higher on the quiz, you'll be awarded with a certificate to show that you have attended our session. If you want to stay connected with our upcoming events or want to tell your pre-med friends that are struggling to find mentorship hours about PreMedCC, our social media accounts are all at PreMedCC. Thank you. And then I'll hand it off to Hannah to introduce today's speaker.
Hi, everyone. I'm Hannah. I help run the programming here at PreMedCC. So I'd like to give a warm welcome to Ms. Manisha Lakhotia. Just a short bio, Ms. Lakhotia is an alumni of UC Davis and has been with UC Davis Health Professions Advising since October of 2017. Prior to coming to UC Davis's Health Professions Advising, Ms. Lakhotia worked as an academic advisor for the College of Agricultural and Environmental Sciences Dean's Office and served as a pre-health advisor and career counselor at another UC and a private school for a number of years. As a first-generation college student, Ms. Lakhotia is avid about supporting students and alumni reach their personal, academic, and professional goals. Outside of work, Ms. Lakhotia enjoys baking, reading, and planning her next adventure. So with that said, I will turn it over to you, Ms. Lakhotia.
Hi, thank you for the welcome and having me here today. So how is everybody doing on this Saturday morning? Okay. And as Hannah introduced, so I am an alum of UC Davis, and advising pre-health students is something I really enjoy. My journey into advising actually came from bad advising. And somewhere along the way, I realized that this is what I enjoy doing. Like, no one should be told no. There's always a path and there's always a way to get to your goals. You know, and that imposter syndrome or that voice in your head or that other voice outside that may be saying, you know, it's too hard. Maybe you should look for a plan B. Don't believe in it. You know, I don't believe in it. And I figure, you know, we can get there. We can get there if we know the steps and make that connection for ourselves. Like, you have to have the confidence within yourselves and actually seek out the mentorship and support. So that's just kind of my preamble, but I know today's commentary or today's presentation is about personal statements. Hannah and Madeline will be monitoring the Q&A and will let me know if there's any questions that I need to answer. I am not the greatest at monitoring both, so I'm going to leave it in their hands as I get distracted myself. Also, I am going to turn off my video during the presentation only because looking at me distracts myself. So that way I can focus on just speaking. Let me get the presentation up. It takes, let's see. Actually, give me a second. It takes a second for my computer to actually, oh, let me share. I think I shared the wrong screen. Let's try this one more time. There we go. And then I'll turn it into presentation mode. All right, you should be seeing the actual presentation and not presentation mode. Okay, my computer does weird things to me. Like it's got Zoom fatigue itself. So again, today we're going to be talking about, your steps to success on your personal statement. While the words coming out of my mouth might be physician or doctor, this can apply to any health profession that you plan to pursue. Nothing really changes beyond possibly character count of your personal statement, unless there are specific prompts that you're being asked, but it pretty much can apply to anything. So this is the one and only time I'm going to ask for chat, but can I have an idea of what you've heard about personal statements? And this is the one and only time we're going to use chats. Is there anything that you've heard that are must-haves or things that you should be doing? And that way, as I go through my presentation, I can maybe dispel some myths that are out there. And then after this, it should only be Q&A so that Madeline and Hannah can handle it. But anyone want to make any comments about? Okay, thank you. Anything else? Just some ideas. So yes, a personal statement is very different from a diversity. You do want to be honest. Yep. We'll talk about hobbies and interests and where they might have a space. Time management, so an attribute. Just take another second to see if there's any other comments. Okay, so someone thinks you should be addressing academic challenges, maybe. Okay, that's something I am absolutely going to address. Creative writing, something else I'm going to address. What is creative and what might be too creative. Story, again, something that I'm absolutely going to talk about. A narrative and what that narrative might look like. All right, so thank you for that. Simply put, in terms of a personal statement, in the simplest forms, it's answering who you are and what do they want to know. And that's what we're going to be talking about for today. What does that actually look like? Who you are and what do they want to know? The goals of a personal statement is to reveal motivations, competencies, dedication, and tie to whatever field you're going into, medicine. Give them a glimpse and an idea of your background. What makes you who you are and how does that relate to your tie to this field? And show how your experiences, whether health related or not, relate to who you are and how you are tying that to becoming a physician, right? So it's a little bit of all of this. Now, traditionally speaking, most people would say you're answering why medicine. We're going to add to that. It's what value do you bring to medicine? Not just why medicine, but what value. And also looking at, it's not just why medicine, but why do I want to go into medicine or become a physician? What experiences have I had that affirm this for me? What attributes and competencies have I developed that relate to my future professional self? How does this all tie together? Before we can jump into what a personal statement is, I think it's a good time to dispel some things that it's not. So what it is it does show who you are. And again, we're focusing on you, your story. We're looking at I, me, my pronouns. It highlights competencies, insights you've gained, and skills you have. You're going to tie short stories back to medicine. And again, these can be stories from your experiences in medicine, and it could be stories from other pieces of your life, whether you're an athlete, a musician, an artist, maybe it's from a job you hold. But again, we're looking at those. How does it tie back to you wanting, what you bring to medicine and what value you bring to medicine? And you want to show them what you want to do in your future. With all of this that you're writing, how does this reflect your future goals? Now, we know goals can change, but in that moment in time that you're writing this, what does that look like? And again, I want to dispel something that it's not. There are places in the application where this, some of my whatnots come up, but we don't want to talk about bad grades. Bad grades have no reflection on why medicine and who you are. They're a moment in time, but a personal statement is not about that. It's not necessarily a one long story that describes your decision to pursue a career. That's an autobiography. And a personal statement is not an autobiography. Now, there is a time and place where autobiography may come in. Usually it's in secondaries or supplements, but it's not necessarily what your personal statement is. Someone had mentioned this in the chat. It's not a disadvantage statement. Now, there may be ties from what you bring up in your disadvantage statement that reflect what your, an explanation, how you describe your involvements and your goals, but it is not a place where you're writing your disadvantage statement. Almost all applications have another essay for that. And it's not a list of experiences. While you do want to connect what you've done to the field of medicine, we're not listing out everything you did in an experience or opportunity. Again, there's somewhere else on an application where you have an opportunity to do that. You might touch upon some things in your personal statement, but you're not necessarily listing out everything you did. That's not telling me who you are. That's showing me what you've done, but not who you are. I'm going to pause there real quick. Anything that's coming up in Q&A that I need to touch upon? All right, then I'm going to keep going. So before we can start this work, we need to understand one of the things I brought up is what value do you bring to medicine? Now, I use this chart for many different things, so we're going to not focus on metrics. So let's not focus on the inner circle right now, but I want you to take a look at some of the words in the attributes and experiences, the outer circles. And why do you think that might matter? Why do you think a medical school or any health professional school would want to know this about you or consider this as part of your personal statement? So I'm going to pause there and then I'll chat about it. But I want you to think about that why would a medical school or any health professional school think about this? So we want to think about, again, what value do you bring? So how can gender identity or sexual orientation or religion or citizenship factor into why a medical school would be interested in you? So if we think about the population, if we think about what and who we want to ultimately serve, what are populations where going to see a physician might not be safe? We're going to a physician and being concerned that maybe we won't be understood, we won't be heard, is a factor. So then when you think about yourself and what value you can bring, you think about it from these aspects. How can I, with my faith, support a population that may have concerns or be able to bridge that connection and build that rapport? How can I, with my age, be able to connect with certain populations? One of the things I mentioned is one day you might be my physician. How can you relate to me? And so you want to think about that, having cultural humility, citizenship, and then having global experiences, being an athlete. All of these have built competencies within yourself, things that you've involved in. You've either strengthened or built attributes, competencies, or skills. All of these factor into the type of physician you represent. All of these factor into how you connect with patients. So the work starts with understanding who you are and how those pieces of who you are add value to the field of medicine, add value to the patients you'll be connecting with, add diversity, understanding to the field of medicine. So growing from that, we want to look at our application as a whole, and specifically our personal statement from a competency base. So you can Google AAMC core competencies and these words are going to come up. And again, whether it's the field of medicine or any other health field, this is what you're focusing your writing from. So again, I want you to think about activities and experiences. You know, something that I always ask students, if you're a student athlete, what competencies have you built within yourself as a student athlete? If you're working as a barista, what skills and attributes have you built? And all of these pieces of what you've built outside the field of medicine, you can bring these skills to the field of medicine, right? Just because it's not in healthcare, it doesn't count. It still comes with you. And this is why, looking back at that last chart, all those pieces of yourself have value. When I was an undergrad, I worked 20 hours a week. So I had very limited time to be involved in extracurriculars. But in that job, I can easily pull cultural competence, teamwork, oral communication, adaptability, dependability, written communication, social skills. I can pull all of those words from the student job that I held on campus. And these reflect who I am. These reflect what service, what the ways I connect with other people. So that's what I'm going to challenge you and ask you to do, is to think about all those things and what have you built within yourself. Which leads me to the first homework assignment, not to do today, but for you to think about. So how do I begin? How do I even know what I want to write about? So I want you to first start off with thinking of 5 points in your life from childhood to who you are today. I say college, but I also want to respect any of you who might be mature students. So I want you to think about, something happened to you. And it could be anything, it could be health related, it could be non-health related. But from that, you realize something, your view was changed because of something that happened. Something impacted you and had an effect on you. Your perspective was changed. This could be a neighbor from a community you've never interacted in, moved into your neighborhood. This could be an experience that you had with adversity or diversity when you were in high school. This could be at a job and somebody engaging in you in a way that you were shocked or surprised. This could be where you were positively surprised at an interaction that happened. But I want you to think about at least 5 points in your life. And again, not to do in this immediate right now, but how we start this process. Now from those, now we consider a little bit more. What actually happened? And when you're doing this homework assignment, I want you to write it out. I don't want you to censor yourself. I don't want you to limit your characters. That comes later. I just want you to write out what actually happened. And what did you do? What was your role in what was going on? What did you realize from this? That perspective, that moment in time learning, that engagement. And what did it prompt or motivate in you? Because of what happened, I wanted to do something about this. I wanted to be part of this. So these are the things that I want you to write out in as much detail as you can possibly do, because it's important to understand it in that detail, so that when we pull pieces of it to write about, we know the breadth and depth of the story. Now we're going to put this aside and change gears a moment in our thinking. So we want to think about our extracurriculars. Why did you choose that specific experience to be involved in? Why was it important for you to be there? So again, homework assignment number 2 coming out of this. The details. What do you actually do? And again, this could be health related. This could be a job you have. Again, remember, I work 20 hours a week through school. So a lot of my professional, social engagement and development came from the student job that at the time I was like, it's just a way for me to pay bills. It's just a way to help me support myself through college. But when I think back to it, it was something a lot more. So, but I do, you do want to know, what do you do? Because again, while today we're talking about personal statements, we want to know all your writing so that we know where this goes later, but you need to know what you did. So thinking about the environment of the experience, what did you learn? What did you learn about the people? What did you learn about the interactions? What did you learn about the work involved? And then I should preface with something that I want you to start doing and becoming and making it a habit is I statements. I, me, my. I want you to really think about your writing from your perspective. I, me, my. It's very easy to stray into the you form. You think about when you're on the job that you want to do this. I don't know who this you is. I don't know who this you is people are talking about. I want you to think about in this job, what I learned. If you were part of a team, we definitely want to acknowledge that team. And then again, focus in our contributions, our learnings. So what did I do? What was my contribution? What did I learn? What did I gain? So I should have prefaced that I want you to start practice thinking in the first person pronoun for this, because that's what the writing's going to entail. When you were in this experience, what did you learn about yourself? What might have been those big aha moments? What might have been those small aha moments? For example, at one point in my life, I thought I wanted to be a teacher. And I was getting my grad school applications. And my friend who was a teacher in elementary school, which is what I thought I wanted to teach children, because I love children, said, why don't you come volunteer at my school? And I did, first, second, and third grades, because I'm like, this is what I want to change. This is the impact I want to make. I walked out, I buckled myself in her car, and I said, no. While all the teachers were like, Manisha, we love you. You should absolutely do this. My answer was no, absolutely not. What did I learn about myself? I learned that what I thought about kids in school was not reality, that I needed structure. Third graders are rolling around on the ground, breaking pencils, picking their nose. This is not me. I need structure. I need ability to have a conversation with someone. So that's what I mean. What did I learn about myself? The goods, the bads, but again, nothing is bad. It's understanding who you are. And in that day I volunteered, I understood a little bit more about myself and my needs as a professional. What attributes did you learn or strengthen when you were there? Going back a few slides, that competency-based application, those 14 words, what did I learn or strengthen? And then what impact being in this experience have on me? What did it motivate in me? What did it change in me? How did I grow from this? And then you're going to write out anecdotal or examples that reflect these learned moments. This is really critical that you think this out. Many times when people are writing a personal statement, they think, oh, I just need to go in and write. But you need to understand yourself and what your experiences, professional, personal, academic, extracurricular, hobbies, what all these mean to you, and what you've gained from them. And once we have all this writing, we're going to start synthesizing it. Now, some of it's going to go in your personal statement, and that's what our focus is today. Some of it's going to go in other aspects of your application ultimately. But again, once we have all this homework done, all these pieces written, we want to now start synthesizing. So, and actually, let me backtrack for a second. So once you have your stories, synthesize them. Are there any commonalities that you're seeing? So going back to this, when we began this, right, these 5 points, are we seeing any commonalities when we're considering our extracurriculars? Are there multiple stories that are saying similar things about you or your future or your interests or your goals? Is there anything from your past in any way predicting or demonstrating what your hopes are for the future? Are you seeing a theme that might tie things together? And again, not all personal statements have a theme. It's not a requirement for a personal statement. Again, we're just trying to tie our past and what we got from our 5 stories, from our extracurriculars or work experiences, and seeing if there are any commonalities. Another step to this is grab a highlighter and highlight common words that you're seeing. I had one young lady come back to me and she had color coded. She had gone in with the idea that I was going to write my personal statement with these 4 attributes. This is really important for me to reflect in my personal statement. And after this assignment, she realized there were other attributes that were naturally coming through much louder and stronger. And it reshaped her personal statement to something a lot more authentic to who she was, rather than forcing a certain piece of writing. So that's what we're doing. We're synthesizing our stories. We're looking for commonalities. We're looking for connections. We're looking for those attributes, those competencies to come across. And then we start writing. So one of the things many people will come to me, and there's 2 approaches to writing a personal statement, and here's one. So one is you can start with a story or idea, and you lead your story to make a point. And at the end of that, you have a thesis. So the end of your first paragraph should have a clear statement if you're taking the story-based approach. A personal statement is an essay. The essay is about you. This one approach is I start with a story. And at the end of it, I need to make a clear statement. And then with each paragraph, I'm introducing a concept and write about what the concept is next to each paragraph, right? So you want to start writing this out. The main point of each paragraph is you want to reveal an attribute, different attributes about yourself. And you want to say, what is this saying about me? Where am I in this story? What is the reader learning about me? Did you tell a story in the paragraph that's leading to your point? And a story, that anecdotal story should be a couple of sentences, not too much more. I follow what I call the 30-70 rule. 30% story, 1 to 3 sentences max. 70% self-reflection. What did I learn, gain, grow? What impact did this have on me? What am I learning about myself that ties to medicine? So the story is important because you don't want to tell the whole time. And I have a couple of examples, but you want to show. And then ending each paragraph, we're calling it a power statement. I call it a conclusive sentence, summing up what you want the reader to know about you and your future goals. That is the last piece of that paragraph. As a future physician, I want to continue blank. So and this is going to be a very rough example, but when I mean too much story, that 70-30 or that 30-70. So let's take it, for example, maybe you were scribing or shadowing a physician. So here's one version. The physician, I brought the patient in the room and conducted her vitals. I noticed she was very nervous. The physician walked in and Dr. J shared the results of the most recent labs to the patient. And the patient began crying and thanking the physician for all her help and support. Or what have I learned about you? Nothing. This is the doctor and patient story. After rooming the patient, Dr. J came in. I watched how Dr. J put the chart aside, held the patient's hand, and shared that she was officially in remission. In that moment, I truly understood what it meant to bridge a connection and focus solely on the patient. That's talking more from my perspective and what I got out of that moment. So the first version is focusing more on the patient and doctor story. The second version, even though I'm an observer to all this, is my perspective and what am I gaining from this? And then thinking about that power statement or that conclusive statement, as a future physician, like Dr. J, I want to work on bridging a connection and relationship with all my patients. So this sentence is summing up for the reader what you want them to know about you. And that's the importance of that concluding sentence. You're summing it up, you're wrapping it up for the reader. One thing that I also want to be clear on is the reader of your personal statement is a professional in that field. So if you're applying to medical school, a physician is reading it. So we want to make sure we're not trying to educate or teach the physician about what doctors do. We're showing who we are and what we've learned from our experiences. We don't need to educate them. We need to tell them what we've learned. I'm going to pause super quick. Is there anything that I need to address that you're finding in the last few slides?
Ms. Lakhotia, there was one question and it asks, where should we address weaknesses with classes/bad grades, especially if we are a first generation / it was difficult to adjust to college?
Thank you very much. And please call me Manisha. But that is a very good question. So that is typically going to be addressed in your supplements or secondaries. So every medical school, after your personal statement and they've evaluated you, if they're continue to be interested, we'll send out what's called a supplement or secondary, which is a school-specific application. In that, many will ask about adversity. Many will ask about, is there anything about yourself that you would like to address? Are there any concerns about your applications that you want us, the admissions committee, want to know? The reason it's not in your personal statement or the primary application is that doesn't define you. Those bad grades that might have come up because you were first gen, and I was first gen, and let me tell you, my first quarter at Davis, I saw letters I'd never seen in my life. I got a B, C, and a D. And this was the day when they gave you a paper. report card, and I actually held it sideways thinking, did they misprint my A? Like, that's how much denial I was in. But going back to the question, medical schools and health professional schools, they don't want you to define yourself by blips in your academic. That's why it's not revealed in your primary application. Those bad grades do not define you. Those bad grades don't say anything about you and you being a physician. They have access to your transcripts. They're going to see it, and they're going to see the upward trend that's subsequently followed. If they're interested in wanting to know more, they're going to ask that question in the secondary, where that is where you would answer these questions, the adversity, the anything else about me, the challenges, anything about our application that might be concerning to the admissions committee. But that primary application is simply about you addressing what value do you bring to medicine? Why do I want to be a doctor? How do I know? What experiences have I had? What attributes have I built? How do I see myself as a future physician? How does all of this tie together to what I want to bring to medicine? So I know it could feel disconcerting that I really, really want them to know that this was because the transition from high school to community college or community college to a four-year institution was harder than I thought. It doesn't define you. And that's why they don't ask for it in your primary application. So hopefully I answered that question. If something, you want me to go more into, but that's why it's in secondaries where you can address it, but your primary is all about the value you bring. All about the value you bring, not any oopsies that come along the way. So that's why we don't talk about it in our personal statement. It's not who we are. It's something that happened in a moment. That's something we learned from, but not necessarily who we are in terms of our goals of being a physician. Same thing, you might be trying to tie it to resilience. And again, that comes more in the secondaries when we start going to more about any oopsies we've had along the way. So I'm going to move on unless there's something else, but that was a very good question. I appreciate you bringing that up because I have read many in the years I've been doing this, many people saying like, I really want them to know about this, but medical schools don't want you to define yourself by that. They want you to define yourself by your accomplishments. So some tips before we get into some other aspects and a couple of examples. I encourage you to read out loud. The best personal statements are the ones that sound like you, that are authentic. So I actually write like I speak, but more like my professional tone. And that's the voice I want the reader to get out of me. That's the voice I want them to walk away. So I encourage you to read it out loud to make sure that it sounds like you. If you want to, I would record yourself and play it back and listen with a critical ear, not critical in the sense that, oh my God, I sound so horrible, but critical in that, do I sound like me or am I trying to change the tone or who I am? Now, if you're feeling brave, and I encourage you to do this, have someone else read it to you. Listen to their interpretation of your personal statement. Are they pausing where you didn't expect them to pause? Is their voice catching where you didn't expect it, or rereading pieces? That's a good way for you to know where you need to smooth things out. Ask a select few people to read it. And why I say a select few is a personal statement in one sense can be like a car. You take your car to 10 mechanics, you're going to get 10 opinions. You want opinions, but too many opinions are too many hands in the pot. It's going to muddle you and the statement so that it may no longer sound like you. So I encourage you to take it to a few people who know you well, who can say, you didn't convey yourself? Or why are you leaving this piece of yourself out? That's really, like, whenever I've heard you talk about yourself over the years, that's a story that comes up. Then you want to take it to some professionals to get a sense of how it's connecting as a whole. Is it conveying what, are they understanding your connection to the field of medicine? Are they understanding why and what's bringing you to the field of medicine? Are they understanding who you are? If you have someone who's a really good writer, have them kind of edit it for grammar and content. Have a couple of professionals, maybe a mentor. If you have access to someone in health professions advising, someone who's reading it, admission, someone who knows what to look for, scrutinize. That's really important. Again, am I conveying? Am I in the story? Am I part of the story? Am I giving my perspective? Eliminate generalized statements and assumptions. People become doctors because they want to help people. What have I learned about you in that statement? Nothing. I've learned nothing about you. That's an assumption. That's both a generalized statement and an assumption. I've learned nothing. That adds no value to your personal statement. Your personal statement is your real estate, and you're giving away unnecessary characters for something that doesn't help me understand anything about you. Avoid passive writing. Passive writing in that. So being involved in this camp helped me understand blank. This helped me, gave me, provided me is passive. What you're saying is it was done to you. When you have a verb followed by me, it's very passive. It was done to you. It was not done to you. Through this experience, I gained a better understanding of. That's active. That's you taking charge of your learned moment versus saying it was passively given to you. And edit. I kid you not, I've sent out emails or written stuff where I'm like, oops, should have taken that extra moment. Because, poor writing, poor editing, writing in the middle of the night, this isn't good writing. That may be ideas that came out, but you want to make the time to refine it. Make it your voice. Make sure that you're eliminating, casual mistakes, spelling errors. And that's why other people writing, because they're using the wrong there changes, context. So these are some general writing tips that I want to, share. Again, I'm going to take a quick pause. Is there any other questions before I do have an example that I want us to go through before I get into some final wrap up? So any questions that I could answer before we go into an example?
Yes, Manisha, there was one follow-up question to the previous question answered. Is this a good time to go over that one?
Sure, absolutely.
Okay, so this person asks, can we speak about change in our life, not necessarily related to academics, that influenced us to pursue medicine? Or is it preferred to solely focus on the values we will be bringing as a future physician?
Great question. So it depends on how you approach it. So if there was a change, then the focus that I want to learn about you, that the reader wants to learn about you, is the impact. So if it's influencing you, what did you do about it? If going back to that writing assignment, those 5 moments in time or your extracurriculars, if something had an impact on you, it's not just because of this, I want to go on and do this. Show me how you've already started that. That's the relation. So we don't just want to say, I want to be a physician because I can bring cultural competence. to my community, show me how whatever that is that happened, how you've already begun doing that. You have to bridge that tie. Just saying, I want to do something isn't enough. Anybody can say they want to do something, but what's that action, however, in whatever capacity it's come across that you've already begun doing that. That's the tie you want to show me from those 5 moments in time to your experiences. Perhaps you, I still write my mom's messages to her physician. I still, even though we've been in this country for a while, sometimes have to step in on behalf of my parents. My dad is educated, but sometimes certain physicians hear his accent and it's not necessarily the best doctor's visit. Now, I can say I'm going to be a better physician because of that, but that doesn't show the reader anything about me. Now, perhaps because of that, I serve as an interpreter on a volunteer basis or as a paid basis at a clinic. Or maybe I serve as an interpreter or translator somewhere in my community where I'm trying to start bridging that gap that I see in my family and that I want to offer my community. Now, the example I'm giving, so, perhaps I teach immigration classes in my native language, right? It's not related to medicine, but I see that gap that I saw in my family and that I'm in some capacity bridging it in my community. That's the tie. There has to be a tangible tie. And then when I tie this back to medicine, as a future physician, I want to bring both my cultural awareness and language skills to serve my future patients. That's the bridge I'm making. Something happened. I saw a problem or a challenge or an adversity. I'm doing something about it. And I'm bringing that tie to the field of medicine. So I use an example of something unrelated to medicine, but I'm tying it back to, for the reader, what I can bring. So that's what I mean by the value I can bring to the field of medicine. I picked an example unrelated to medicine because that's the tie I want to do right now in my life. And I'm bringing it to the field of medicine. So there's got to be a tie. That's what they're reading for. It's not just recognizing the challenges in the world. There's got to be a little bit more to it in some capacity. So hopefully that answered your question. If not, I encourage you to maybe ask follow-up questions, but take a moment to think about that. I want to show you an example of a start of a personal statement. And actually, let me go back for a second. I realized that when I showed you this, I didn't actually share with you the other way to start. So I had mentioned there's 2 approaches to starting a personal statement. One in this example is with an idea or a story. I'm a traditionalist, meaning my writing style is a little more straightforward. I might actually start with an introduction. Through many experiences I've had, I've learned, and this is going to be super generalized because I'm not thinking the whole thing on the spot, but through many experiences I've had, I realized that I want to support my community, specifically in the field of medicine. I took the opportunity to involve myself in both healthcare experiences and experiences in my community that affirmed for me that medicine is the direction I want to go. So I didn't start with the story. I started with an introduction. And I might add to this, from volunteering at a student-run clinic through serving as an interpreter at my local community center, I've learned how I want to support my future patients. So I'm giving them, and I'm doing a little bit more what I call a traditional essay, an introduction, body statements, or body paragraphs that support that introduction, and then a conclusion that wraps it all back together. With the conclusion, whichever start I have, I'm bringing a piece of every idea and bringing it all back together and ending with what I call how I want to save a world or a appeal to medical school. As a future, with a medical education, I will be equipped with the medical knowledge and from my experiences, the cultural competence, language skills, and the focus to return to my community and be a physician my community needs. Here's your one time to tie it all together. So the other way to start it is, introduce the overarching statements. Your body paragraph should support that. Your conclusion ties it all together. Or start with the story and idea. Have a brief thesis statement or a few statements that introduce this and the subsequent stories you're going to write about, and then the conclusion that brings it all together. There's neither is right or wrong. I know that somewhere along the way in your journey, you'll hear you need to have a catch. You need to have a hook. You need to have a story that's going to grab them. You can, but it depends on your writing style. It depends on the story. It depends on authenticity. For me, I might not start with that story. That's not who I am. I'm going to give an overarching description of me, what I've gained from, what experiences I'm going to bring up. Write those, which body paragraphs in either way are going to be the same, and the conclusion. For some people, that story is important. But even with the story and hook, you don't want to be overboard. You don't want the reader to be so focused on the story that they forget about what? That the point they're reading this is about you, to learn about you. And so I want you to keep in mind, whatever style you write is correct. There's no right or wrong. It should be something that's comfortable for you and something that you're confident in. So then let's take a second. I want you to take a second. And I've edited this a little bit. This is a start of someone's statement. I've edited it a little bit, added a little bit of myself into it, a little bit of other people. So to protect someone's writing. But I want you to take a look at this. Take a few seconds to read this. And then again, if we could use the chat for a second, tell me your thoughts about this. Anything you're liking, anything you're struggling with, anything, any thoughts? Okay, we know about Nana and Dr. B, absolutely, but not so much about the writer. It's general. So if I was in medical school reading this, does this help them understand about me if this was me? Very vague on the author. A huge story that was meant to capture the reader, but the walkaway is vagary, general. So now I'm going to show you another version. It's still a work in process, but this is what we came back with as the next edit. So read this. So what are we thinking now? Great. Some more I statements, which is giving us the writer's perspective. Even though this person was an observer, it tells us a little bit about the physician they aspire to be. So they tied for the reader, back to Dr. B, to why do we have to hear about Dr. B? And then, oh, sorry, realize I'm in PowerPoint. I can't highlight anything. That part in green, and again, this is still a work in progress, but they're now introducing for the reader what's to come in the rest of their personal statement. So they started with the story, they started with the perception they had, what they observed, what they understood from their observation, and looking at it here, they're telling the reader what they did next from this perspective, and then kind of giving a range and what they hope to do with this. So yes, this is still a work in progress. I think we're still going to be refining this. But taking a look from what this was, all about Nana and Dr. B, to a little less storytelling, a little bit more about them, less focus on Nana and Dr. B, but what they gained out of it. So this is what we're trying to do, is bring it to you. Even if you're telling me a story where you're the observer, just like I did with the doctor holding the patient's hand and saying you're officially in remission. I can either give it to you from the doctor's perspective, or I could give it to you from my perspective, but what I saw happening. In that moment, I understood, I realized, I saw. That's what you're helping the reader. That's what you're helping the reader understand, why they're reading the story and the importance of this story to you. So some final wrap-up moments, and again, there's absolutely time. So a couple things to think about, and things that I had seen some of you write in the beginning. Be honest and authentic. Medical schools receive, on average, depending on the size of the school, 6,000 to 10,000 applications. They know they can sniff out what's not real, what's don't over dramatize the story. If written authentically and honestly, is naturally going to be interesting to the reader. I remember these two starts of a personal statement: the arterial wound spraying from the neck gunshot wound. Like, I don't want to, what does that have to do with anything? Or the one I refused to read and sent back was the feces smeared on the stone walls belied demonstrated the condition in the medical center. What does poop have to do with you going into medicine? Like, that one is like, no one wants to read this. That's being dramatic for the sake of drama. That hook, that catch, that's not doing the writer any justice. You're just trying to grab the reader, but again, they're not getting anything out of you. Reveal about yourself. Even if you're an observer to a situation, you're still revealing your thoughts, what you've learned. Illustrate your attributes, those 14 competencies, so your skills. Show, don't tell. Use stories, 1 to 3 sentences to illustrate. And again, as I've been saying all along, I, me, my. We want to know your perspective. If you're part of a team, a brief we, and then bring it back to yourself. And then a couple of don'ts. And I'll answer any questions about this, but don't criticize the field or the current practitioners. There's a different way to make your point when you see a wrong, but to be blunt, you are not a physician today. To criticize and say, I know better, is really going to put some ire up in your reader. They are the physicians. They went into medical school and became a physician for probably similar reasons. You can still make a point about a bad experience without criticizing. You can say, without saying that physician was terrible, you can still convey a negative experience without being critical. Being overgeneral, physicians want to help other people. Physicians want to cure diseases. Physicians want to go into their communities and do better. Again, haven't learned a thing about you. Putting your experiences in without tying it. So again, that tie is, what are those attributes? How does that tie to you as a future physician, you as a future medical student, you returning to your community, and using the you form. We don't know who this general you is. We don't know what value that brings. I want to know about I, me, my. And I know it can feel odd to constantly be talking about yourself, but that's the point. It's a personal statement. And then at the end of the day, also keep this in your mind. While your reader is a physician, we're not educating a physician. Every school is different. Every screener is different. You're not going to make everyone happy. But what you can do is be authentic so that they understand your voice. They understand who you are, your motivations, your learned moments. On average, a California student is going to roughly apply to 25 to 30 medical schools. That's the reality of us being in California and in a state that's extremely competitive. We export 60% of our applicants to out of state. That's just unfortunate, but that's the reality. You're not going to make everyone happy, but what you can do is engage them and interest them by being authentic. That's what's most important. So if you try to write to every reader, that's going to muddle your statement, that's going to muddle and make it hard to understand you. But when you do your secondary, that's where you're going to be able to write to a specific school. That's where you're going to be able to connect to a specific medical school. And that's, so we save it for that. I'm going to go ahead and let me end this. So that's what I want to leave you with today in terms of what you're trying to convey throughout your personal statement, what you're hoping to share with your personal statement. We have a few minutes. I know it's a beautiful Saturday outside, but any questions that I could answer for you, you could either continue to use the Q&A function or a direct chat to Hannah, Madeline, or myself. I'm happy to be here for a few more minutes and answer any last questions.
So we don't have any questions at the moment. I'm sure some will come in, but I just wanted to ask, how long do you think is a good amount of time to be working on your personal statement?
Wonderful. Most people will go through about 7 to 12 drafts. Now, having said that, that depends also on your willingness to share your early writing and start getting feedback early. So, for example, I had somebody bringing me their 13th draft, which was the first time they had a professional read it. They'd been relying on friends up to then. Now, this is how I felt getting that 13th draft is, so that piece of writing that I showed you, that example with Nana, that was what I read in their 13th draft. Had they brought me their first, second, or third draft, we could have probably cleaned that up a lot sooner and stayed in that 7 to 13 like draft timeframe. So this person essentially on their 13th draft was starting from ground zero. And I had to make some changes to that for today, because again, I want to respect that person's privacy. That first draft I read, that first paragraph was this big. And so had they begun bringing that to someone sooner, we could have started that cleaning. So I'm going to be honest, your first, second, and third draft is going to be bad. It's going to be bad. It's going to be crappy. It's going to have grammar. It's going to have long stories. I don't care. The point of that first, second, and third draft is for you to get all that good story, all that writing out so that we can start editing. I know a personal statement for medical school is 5,300 characters. I've had people bring me 12,000 characters. I'm okay with that if that's your process. I don't want to be the one censoring you. I am going to be like one eyebrow up and go, wow, that's a lot. That's going to be my thought bubble. And then we're going to start taking those 12,000 characters and start slicing and dicing and getting it down. But I don't want to censor you.
Can I just add one more thing too? Is I know that UC Davis has around 5,000 pre-health students. So the difference between a professional reading your personal statement and your friend is how many personal statements do you read a year?
Me?
Yes.
Oh dear God, I've been doing this for 20 years.
So let's say you read 2,000. So you've got a lot more experience reading personal statements than your friends. I mean, your friends can give you good feedbacks, but someone who's been doing it, and I think that's so important to having a professional who's been doing this since she was obviously 9 years old, but in a real sense, you've done this so much that you know what the schools look for, but you've done, you know, what's successful versus what's not successful. And also, being a professional at it adds that extra layer. Not that your friends don't have your best interest, but your friends are not professionals at this. And so it's kind of like saying, if you have a toothache, do you go to a dentist or do you go to your friend who, you know, who maybe, I don't know, worked at a vet clinic or something? So it's just really important to have a professional lay eyes on them. And I know there's a lot of resources available out there, but be very choosy on who reads your and gives you feedback, just because not all feedbacks are created equal.
Thank you for that. So yeah, that is critical. I do encourage you to have some good friends read it because they're reading it for your voice. They're going to be the ones that help you remember your voice. You are going to be your worst critic when writing this. And you're going to, over the years, I didn't want to show this to you, Manisha. I was really, embarrassed. I'm like, there's no embarrassment. I don't want to be giving you feedback on what you thought was a polished 13th draft, because that's the first time I laid eyes on it or a professional laid eyes on it. So, and again, to Jubin's point, be critical. There are people who hopefully are going to go to a school that has, a writing center, graduate school advising, health professions advising, but people Like I've known students pay $2,000 to $5,000 for someone to help them write their statement. I don't know where they got trained. I went to grad school and I go to presentations from admissions representatives constantly. That's how I know what they want, because I'm attending sessions where the admissions folks are saying, here's what we want to hear. So I take that and I incorporate that, and then also know how to help students diversify. I don't want 10 students to output the same statement. I don't know what these other people who are charging do. They're just trying to get money and send it out. Like they may have experience, but I also want the writer to convey their voice. I don't get anything out of this other than the satisfaction that you matriculated. Like that's my satisfaction. I get paid regardless. Like the university pays me regardless. So my satisfaction is you got in. So be very choosy. I've had people bring those, I paid $5,000 because my parents made me, come back to me and I'm like, do you want to go with this? Like, do you want to go with this? Because I can give you my opinion and I am a voice, but we've torn up that. And so I would be choosy. And make sure that people have your best interest in mind. But again, do use your friends so that they know your voice, but then let's work on it and don't be shy about sharing it early, because we can start making those connections, or I can give you homework to help you make those connections sooner than having you hit your head against the wall, like when you think you're done. How many stories or self-reflection should be in a personal statement? If we're talking about a 5,300 character med school, I think reasonably people share about 3, maybe 4, like each paragraph. Otherwise, we start diluting. It and it just becomes a list. We're not really getting more out of you. So I think reasonably 3 to 4, but again, it depends. I've had one person, spend 5 years in an environment and pick a few different stories along the way. So that's what I mean. It really depends on you. I can't give a one size fits all. And so when you do that homework, when you come back to the professional, we're going to work with you and say, okay, this makes sense for you. Being non-traditional and taking some gap years, I think that is addressed in your secondaries, but your experiences might show up in your personal statement. We're not making excuses for who we are. We're not making excuses for our choices, but we speak to what we've accomplished along the way. Those stories show up in your personal statement. We don't have to defend ourselves and our choices. I went to grad school at 30, 29, right? I'm not going to excuse the 9-year gap.
Manisha, we lost your video and audio. I'm not sure if you're still here, but it is it's quiet right now. We can't see you.
Come back.
I apologize. For some reason, many days of the week, my internet decides to go on lunch. 12 to 1:30, I'm going to lose the internet at some point. I apologize. But with the creative writing comment, I appreciate straightforward writing, succinct writing. We can add to it. Like I'm a pretty straightforward writer. I write and then I might add to it. If you are dramatic to begin with, that's fine. Go with what's natural for you. And then when your professional reader reads it, they can help you kind of slice and dice what might be too much. So remember Nana's story to what our second draft was? They came in with that. We sliced and diced some of the extra, right? And focused on them in a little more succinctness, but still interesting, right? So do what's right for you. I can't tell you how to start because it has to be right for you. So when I was an undergrad, I had an English teacher that really helped me appreciate my writing style. Say there's three kind of writers in the world. There's the sprinters, the plotters, and the bleeders. The sprinters get everything out all at once. It's not going to fit into any box. It's just right. And then the revisions start. The plotters kind of go along. It's a little bit harder to get the ideas are. They're kind of working on it, but they eventually get it out. And then the true work begins. The bleeders, I was a bleeder. It's every ounce of my life to get out there, but I don't know how to do, like, I personally don't know how to do drafts. I'm like a wave. I go back and I fix and I go back and I fix. And when I see something later, I come back. So appreciate your own style of writing. And we can work with, like, whoever's working with you can work with you to clean it up and to get it into space, but don't censor yourself. I find when people censor themselves in the beginning, it wasn't authentic. It didn't, like, there was so much missing. I didn't get to understand them, to be able to say what I'm hearing or what I'm reading is, because I'll go in and I'll start circling, like, this is what I'm getting out of it. Is that what you wanted me to get out of it? So write whatever style works for you, sprinting, plotting, or bleeding. We can go all of it, it works. But that's what I would encourage you to do, is just not censor yourself in the beginning. Like I said, I had 13,000 characters. I was like, whoa, we got some work to do. You know what? We got it cleaned up. She loved it. It was authentic. I understood her reasoning behind it, but that's how her ideas came out. A diversity statement is as a second essay that's going to be part of your personal, actually, let me take it back. So there's a disadvantage statement and there's a diversity statement. A disadvantage statement is usually part of your personal statement, and your primary application. And it's your opportunity to share any adversity you went through, whether it's academic, educational, environmental, or economical, typically through your K through your K through 12. That had an impact on you, that gives the reader a glimpse of your background and how it lays out the rest of your story. So economic meaning, we qualified for food. I qualified for free lunches at school. Economic, educational. I went to a school that did not have resources to prepare me for college.
You were receiving federal subsidized lunch.
We're receiving federal subsidiary. Environmental, maybe I grew up in a not safe environment. Maybe it was a single parent household. Maybe I was responsible for taking care of my siblings because my parents worked. Maybe I worked to help support my family. So this is somewhat of what we're addressing. Now, there is a time where in your college years, this might come through. I had a young lady who her first year lost both parents, went from parents supporting her to suddenly having to work 4 jobs to support herself through college. So again, it's not my place to tell you your story. You tell me and we help, refine it so that the reader understands, and it's about the impact it had on you. So after going to school, I came home and I was responsible for caring for my younger siblings, including cooking meals and helping them with homework. I had to grow up fast, and it limited my opportunities to engage in after-school activities, and down the line really impacted my understanding of who I wanted to be professionally. There's an impact. I don't want to use the word subjective because it's your story, but it's laying out what happened and the impact it had on you. That's disadvantage statement. Diversity is in secondaries. Remember that chart I showed you in the beginning? What do you offer the school in the field of medicine? Because of who you are or the experiences you've had, what do you bring to the table that adds value to both either the school or the field of medicine? That is diversity. And everybody has something that's happened to them. So whether it be, like I said, gender identity, religion, whether it be I'm a non-traditional or experienced student, my distance traveled, I went to school at 30 for graduate school. What do I bring to my colleagues, my peers, and eventually the field of medicine? And so we would explore that and look at what it is you would offer. So disadvantage is in your primary, diversities and secondaries, and we would look at that holistic chart to pull out pieces. Diversity could also be maybe I grew up in an environment where everyone was similar, and suddenly I had a neighbor that was very different, and I learned something about a culture that I didn't know before, and it impacted my view not only on my own biases, but what I've chosen to do with that newfound knowledge and understanding I've gained. That is also diversity. Hopefully that helped answer, but other questions and thoughts? Looks like we're winding down. Jubin, Madeline, or Hannah, is there anything else you think would be helpful to know?
No, I just put a link to the NAHP find an advisor and also request an advisor. I know a lot of people at the community college level and even some of the other schools don't have access to pre-health advising, and so I put that up there.
I used to volunteer for that at the prior school I worked with, connecting with students that their undergrad institution did not have a pre-health advisor or graduate school advisor. So just to let you know, if you do use that service, if the individual does look at the school you're attending to see if you have access, and then we'll connect you with the local advisor. So when I used to volunteer for that, I got many students on the West Coast or who might have done their schooling abroad and were looking to go to med school. So it's a great service. They will connect you. But I would encourage you, like I was a first-gen student, I didn't know my resources on campus. And I'm going to be honest, I didn't try to get to know my resources on campus because I was very, like, I just need to get through school and the next step. I didn't know how to ask for help. I didn't want to ask for help. And you do yourself a disadvantage. So when you are in your four-year institution, if you move on to one, look at what's there, look at what's available and utilize it. Everyone there is there to help you. You know, I sometimes I'm connected with undergrads who didn't even know Davis had a pre-health advising office. And so, you know, that tells me I got to do a little more outreach on my own campus, but we're also a young department. On our campus, we're only 7 years old. And so sometimes alumni from, you know, back then didn't know they have this service now. So do look around and do take advantage of all the resources on your campus, and then also take advantage of what NAF has to offer. NAF is the professional organization I'm part of. And NAF stands for National Association of Advisors of the Health Professions, which is made up of pre-health advisors, admissions advisors at health professional schools, who've just gathered to share knowledge. So going back to what Jubin was saying earlier, like, be aware of who you're asking. I'm part of this organization. I'm linked to people who can best inform me how I can best inform my students. Any last questions?
No, we're gonna let you go. Thank you again for making time.
Absolutely. All right, so have a good afternoon, folks.